So we're going to give you the first recognition from Robert McCullough. Robert McCullough first invented chainsaws in 1943 and first designed them as one of the most credible chainsaws before they went to shit back in the early 1990s. Now, Robert McCullough featured a lot of designs like the Super 33, the Super 34, the Super 35. Then, in the early 1960s, Robert McCullough invented go-karts in the early 50s and 40s. He made a twin-cylinder go-kart, and he also made a lot of great chainsaws. And Robert McCullough's design date back to 1943, after he first designed chainsaws and evolutionary chainsaws and ever designed them and put them in a production line. But it doesn't make me be a nerd about it, because I'm not a nerd about it. And sometimes I could be stupid, sometimes I could be dumb. But one thing about Robert McCullough's design from 1943 is their design. It was all about the design of the chainsaw. So in 1960, the first ever direct drive chainsaw was just, a few other models out there. I mean, there's a lot of model direct drive chainsaws out there. But direct drive was first invented from Robert McCullough in 1954. And in 1955, they also make a 770, the 77. So McCullough 77 was one of the other chainsaws that McCullough really designed that chainsaw with. Had over 100 cc's to be exact. Then they featured other models like the 149. Also, the 549. They also make a 449 from 1953 to 52, and then they go up to 1955 to 59. So they also make a 39. They also make a McCullough C34 Super. They also make a McCullough C33 Super. I saw one of those in person, and I never picked it up. I mean, I wish I did, but the guy was asking way too much for it. Because asking a chainsaw for $100 is asking like, you're crazy. It needs a lot of work. Why'd you throw it a big old price if it needs a lot of work? Now, chainsaws for me, I'm a chainsaw mechanic, and I worked on my chainsaws and all my life, and I try to get this stuff to figure out. So I have old chainsaw carcasses I threw away, and I just take all the parts off of it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't run, doesn't start, doesn't fire up, doesn't do anything, well, I just threw it away and just how about her? And so date back to 1960. So 1960, they also make the McCullough 15. Mac 15 was one from 1962 to 63. They made up all of the 64. Then they also make a 143. That was the same thing as a Super 250, the regular 250. And this is when the Super 250 was getting ready to come out. So they started at first in 1960. Was the McCullough 143 and the 140. And they also make a 142. And it also goes up to 150 in 1962. It just kept going up. So in 1962, they invented the 150 series. So Robert McCullough's like, yeah, we need to keep making more design of 80cc chainsaws. These saws, you just get they cut like this, go deep down the wood. That's what they do. They go I mean, that's what they sound like. I mean, when they cut down slow, they don't cut fast. But date back in 1963. Now this is what's getting better. This is when the 250 came out in 1960. So they also start making it. The 200 didn't come out till 1963 to 64, and McCullough's design was one of the most designed chainsaws out in the brands out there. But in the early 1990s, McCullough had featured a lot of designs, such as, a lot of designs. So McCullough designed another chainsaw from the early 1960s, was called the 250 in 1960. So they leased about a few models. They listed up the 143, the 142, 140, and they go up to 150. 1-150, the 1-53, and the 52 model. They also go up to a 163. Then after that, 1964 to be started. In 1963 to 64, the 200 series were coming out. So they come out with a 200, 300, and the 400. In 1965, the 66 was going to be the Super 250 lineup. The Super 250 didn't come out yet until 1967. Well, actually, no, it was 66. Then it was 67. So in 65, they come out with, in 66 finally, they came out with the Super 250 model first. It was actually came out first, but it was a yellow cover first, before it came to be the black cover in 1969 to 68 was the black cover one. One with they just really painted it black. That was it, and it give it a little bit more CCs, which is 87 CCs to be exact for the Super 250. They all have different CCs, like the 143 only has 77 CCs, and the 150 only has 79 CCs, and if you go up to like a 153, it can go up to 80 CCs. So is the 152, it can go up to 80 CCs. Same as the 143. The 1-43 also goes up to 80 CCs. And then your Super 250 only has 80 CCs. Then finally, in 1966, it only has 85 CCs at the time being, so the Super 250 back in the early 1967 to 66 was the first prototype of the Super 250 because they needed something to cut fast, not go through the wood. So Robert McCullough's like, I got a new idea. Well, we'll just call it a Super 250. So 1966 was the first ever Super 250 finally. And they released out the model in 1966. So in 1967, they cranked it up a little bit. It only has 85 cc's. They didn't think that was going to be enough, so it was still cutting through the wood slow as it can be. It was like going through the wood, and it was just like making that rev sound. It's like going through the wood again. So Robert McCullough's like, okay, loggers are getting pissed at us, and then other chainsaw brands were cutting even more faster, like the Homelight Zip I got in 1958. Can cut a little bit faster than most other saws back in the day. That was from Homelight. I got that chainsaw, but it needs a lot of work though. I'm still working on it. It doesn't go through the wood. It just cuts it nice and easy. It takes a little bit to cut through, but it's a manual oiler. But the first thing is, so in 1966 to 67 finally, they came up with the 450 series. 450, 550, then the 650. But that was from 1968 to 69. 67, they came up with the 400, the 500 finally, and then the 600 finally. So 1967 was 68 to 69, same thing. But this time, the 150 had an upgrade. So they just changed the cover of it again. So they changed the metal cover to being colored black and give it a little bit more features than the regular 250 that came out as a model. So this is how it began. And so finally in 1968 to 69, the 450, the 550, the 650, 250, and the 380 have finally came out. So the Super 250 have finally came out with a black cover finally. And even the 450 had a black cover. The 380 had a black cover. The 350 had a black cover. And the 650 had a black cover. And the 550, then the 650, and the 660. Then the 660 finally came out with a black cover. Finally, 1973 was the last model, the Super 250. It was either 74, then in 1975, But I knew it was 74 because the 74 was finally the last Super 250 out there. But whoever got the last Super 250 must have it. They made that saw around a totally about 60. So they made the black cover, the Super 250, and all the way to 68. 69 makes 2 already. Then 70 makes 3. 73 makes 4. Then 74 finally was 5 years. They only made that chainsaw for 5 years. Totally, to be exact. So, yeah, 5 years. Chainsaw's been along since, well, actually, I think it was actually 6 years. So that was basically 75 to be exact. So it was total 6 years. So the Super 250 ran up 6 years. Then, in 1970, believed to be 76 to 77 to 78, to all the way to 1980, they made a farm saw called a McCullough farm saw. It was the same thing, has similar reference to the Super 250. It's got some Super 250 parts, some 660 parts thrown on the saw. So they made that saw at the 1980. So for farm use, they only made a few of those blue saws out there. They only came in originally blue or white or red. The rarest one's got to be red, because they also make a red or a green one, which they're both kind of rare. The blue one's not rare, but the red one is. They only lasted a few with the red models, so they came up with different colored ones to represent the models. So the McCullough farm saw is one of the most sought after saws out there from 1980. But they made a lot of those saws up in other eastern countries out there. And other countries out there, they owned it, and we had it too. We had a couple few farm saws around here. That's kind of rare. The blue one's not rare, but the red one and the green one's rare, because those are the only 3 colors they came out with the McCullough saw. Farm McCullough saw. So that saw lasted 1980. That was about maybe 3 years again, 6 years again. And then finally 1977 to 75 to 74, they came out with the 1010 series. So you get the Pro Mac 1010, and the Super 1010 didn't come out to 1977. So they start making Super 1010. They also make a special edition 1010 from 1980, 1982 to 1983. They also make a 10.7, 10.6, 10.5, and the 10.10. And finally, so around the 1980s, they came out with the 800 and the 850. But the 850 didn't come out in the late 70s. So it was the 700. They also made it this time. This was before McCullough in the early 1990s. The last saw was ever made recordedly with 82 cc's. It was the 800 series. You remember that song called Blood on the Scarecrow, Blood on the Plow? That chainsaw was featured in that song. It was a McCullough 800, Mac 800. It was a Pro Mac 800. They also make an 8,000. So they also make an 8,000. That was back in 1984 to 1985. So 1989 to 1988 to 1987, they finally made more and more McCullough. They also make the 610 also, but they go up a little bit more higher and bigger. This time the air cleaner sticks out a little bit more higher. McCullough, at least one of the ferocious design McCulloughs out there. I know the Pro Mac 125 was also made in the early 60s and up through the 70s. The Super 25, the Super 380, and they also make a Super 720. And then you get the Super 895, one of the biggest one of the heaviest chainsaws McCullough makes that you can carry with one hand. That's a chainsaw that'll break your back in the middle of the second. That's just how heavy it is. Now, they also make an 82,000. So they're making 800 to 800. They also make an 8,200 McCullough made from the 1980s. This was before McCullough went to shit in the early 1990s, like what this guy said. Yeah, McCullough chainsaws were shit back in the early 90s, so McCullough actually had a good run with their saws. A good run. Just like Poulin. They went to shit in the early 2000s. And they're no good anymore. But that's basically about it. But you should listen to this. They should literally make a movie about Robert McCullough's design chainsaws. He first started in Illinois. His factory was in Arizona, but it's not anymore. So he moved to Illinois. He kept making even more chainsaws. So there's a whole story about McCullough. You know, I mean, after this chainsaw business keep growing, I mean, it went through so many financial troubles. I mean, so many things was going wrong with Robert McCullough, and he died in the early 1990s, I think. I'm pretty sure. I don't know when Robert McCullough died. I think it was early 90s. Pretty sure. Or the early 80s. He's been making chainsaws since 1946. 1943, actually. It was the very first McCullough chainsaw. It was not direct drive yet. It was gear drive. Chainsaw instead of direct drive. But there's your answer. So, that's all. That's all the story is, guys. Well, I hope you like the story. If I got it wrong, I apologize. Correct me if you want. I don't care, but I really apologize if I'm really messed up. And I have one of my guys that really gave me a shout. You know, this is the guy that gave me a shout out. You know, I really appreciate him for giving me a shout out, and I really thank him for giving me a shout out. You know, so I'm going to be moving, and I try my darndest to find a Super 250. I try my darndest to find a McCullough 1010. But you're just not going to find them around the East Coast where I live at. See, I live on the East Coast. Now, if I lived in the West Coast for all the time of my life, I could probably find those chainsaws easy as clean as day. I mean, you could probably find a McCullough Super 250 down there like it's easy. And some random farmer just sell it down there. Because how many farmers own those saws? A lot of farm owners, a lot of farming down in Ohio, a lot of farming down over in Illinois, and all the way up to Michigan. And Indiana also. That's where you're going to see the McCulloughs at. You're going to see them all around the West Coast. The whole entire West Coast over there, you can find McCullough Super 250s everywhere over there. But when you come down to the East Coast, you're going to see probably about Steels, Huskies everywhere, old Huskies, old Steels, Poulins. I mean, you might find a tiny bit of few McCulloughs in here, but you're not going to find a damn Super 250 around here. The sucky part is, those chainsaws are really absolutely hard to find. Like, people think, oh yeah, these chainsaws are easy. Well, easy for you, because you live in the West Coast. Now, I live in the East Coast, so that's going to make it 10 times more harder. But if you live in the West Coast, or live in Canada, West Coast Canada, you can find McCulloughs everywhere up there. Even Canada. They sold a bunch of freaking mechanic in Canada. Took one to clear it down here, what it is. So I wouldn't doubt you can find every single McCullough that you can dream of in the West Coast or the South Coast. But you're not going to find one so lucky in the East Coast. I done tried. Man, when I went to Ohio, I found, 2 1010s I wish I should have picked up, but I was at that one old, I don't know what, that one old store that used to be in there, but now it's just a big old antique shop in that place now. And I regretted it because that's where you can find McCullough chainsaws all the time. Some vendors will pick them up and they'll resell them back again. And now, I wish I stuck back to where I was looking for chainsaws. I shouldn't be looking for the Pioneer at the time being. I should be out there looking for the McCulloughs. But the only place I'm going to find these chainsaws, unless I go out in Ohio again to go find those. And that's a little far away from me. It's about 4 hours from here for me. Maybe about 5. But still. And I'm moving a lot more further, and that's going to cause a big thing. I ain't going to tell you where I'm moving at. I'm just going to tell you how I'm moving. But that's it. That's all I'm going to say on here. That's all I'm going to mention on here. But I'll tell you what, when you live in the East Coast, you're going to start to tend to find more things harder to find. But when you go to the West Coast, you're going to find things more easier to find. Now you see the big difference. I'd probably say 100% sure there's a lot more McCullough dealers down between the West Coast down there. They probably had over 100, probably like over 1,000 to like 4,000 probably saw shops over there probably that sold McCulloughs. And basically MTD bought out McCullough and now they're just kind of like, to me, they kind of look like a Poland's to me. Basically now. They're sort of built different now. But as you can see, but if I lived in the West Coast for years, and I stumbled across a bunch of McCulloughs, that's where they're normally from. That's where Robert McCullough was designed from. He was cleared out on the West Coast. He was never sold all of his saws to the East Coast. And I'm pretty sure that many people had never bought any McCullough chainsaws. Of course. Because I never got lucky to find one. I never stumbled across one. I mean, I stumbled across one at, a tractor show. I'm at Carlisle. One went to Carlisle. At the spring show. I found one, but it was just a little mini Mac. The little mini Macs they made in the early 90s. Found one of those. I should have bought it, but guy was asking $12 for it. I could have got it running. But no, I came across some Remington Mini I had to buy, and I haven't had any luck on it ever since, and I'm probably going to get the sucker to ever run again. I don't know. There's parts that are going to be really absolutely hard to find for that little mini mite. That's a rare saw. Completely rare saw. It's a deluxe version too also. I think it's called a bear version. Yeah. It's a bear exclusive version. They call it the exclusive. It's not a deluxe, but it's the exclusive model from, but they didn't sell many Remington mini mites. They only sold a few Remington mini mites, just like McCullough's. But have I ever come across a Super 250? Probably never, because I ain't gonna find one around this area. You have to live out in the West Coast to order to find those chainsaws. If you want to look for a 143 or a 152 or a 153, you're going to have to go to the West Coast to find those things that actually has a full wraparound bar. When I bought this Pioneer off this guy, you see, he bought that saw from a West Coast dealer. I guess some guy was at a yard sale, and I guess he picked it up at a this guy was from the West Coast. He drove from all the way to PA from here. He drove all the way to PA just to put his saws up in order. Because I guess the guy was from the West Coast. Now, you can go find those guys too often they come up around this area and selling their saws all the way up here. Some absolutely don't want to drive that far. Some people just want to sell them on Facebook Marketplace or eBay to get more money out of it. But that's the biggest problem is. So, So I'm not going to be able to find any McCulloughs this year or the next year after that because I'm more likely going to be more busy. But I can tell what I'm going to be busy for because I'm not going to explain it. I mean, I'm not going to tell anybody why I'm going to be busy. I'm just going to tell you I'm busy. I'm going to be really extremely busy. But that's all I'm going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you nothing more. But, I ain't going to tell you where I'm moving at. I ain't going to tell you where I'm going to because I'm not going to say it. And I'm not going to go do it. So, no thank you. We're going to keep it as that. But, McCulloughs, they are absolutely hard to find. I mean, you people on the West Coast think, you tell me that's easy for you to find it. But when you come tell me and say, oh, come on, man, it's easy to find these things. You can find these McCulloughs everywhere. Not around the East Coast you can't. New York's too far away from me. About 7 hours from New York. I'm almost about to be 8 hours from New York. Far away from Virginia. And I'm far away from Kentucky. And I'm going to be even more further away from Ohio. But I mean, you people don't get it. West Coast saws, they are obviously, if it's a McCullough, you know it's going to be hard to find. Just like Pioneer. You know it's going to be hard to find because you can only find those saws in the West Coast also because they're Pioneer. I can't believe I actually found a Pioneer, but I haven't gotten the luck to find a McCullough Super 250 or the McCullough 1010, ProMac 1010 from the early 1980s to 1970s. I haven't got lucky on those two saws yet. I like to bring two saws home with me. I like to bring two chainsaws home with me. I mean, if it's $100 for just two chainsaws, I'll call that a good deal. But if it's not a good deal, then I'm not going to pay $200 for both saws. And then I'm going to have to sell something in order to get the chainsaw I really want. In order to find the chainsaw I'm looking for to get what I want. Because you're not going to find those things in and around the East Coast. That's more eBay. But I don't feel like paying $300, $400 for a dang chainsaw that probably is going to need a lot of work. And it's just outrageous what people are going through with their chainsaws these days. I mean, it's not like it's not going to be worth anything because I get McCullough made some comfy rare models, but Super 250 is kind of a rare model. But they only made the Super 250s for 6 years. I say there's got to be more of them out there. There's got to be plenty of them out there. I mean, there can't be just a few out there. There's got to be a couple more. Or a few or more. I don't know. But what I like to say is what makes McCulloughs so hard to find around the West Coast, around the East Coast. It's like you're playing around a game of dice. You lose, you ain't gonna be able to find it. You win, you found it. You found what you're looking for. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. Trying to find a needle in a haystack, basically. Just like that. It's like finding a perfect needle in the haystack. The needle that you've been looking for to put in your collection. But the more you keep searching, the more you keep searching to find the needle in a haystack, the more you're going to keep losing it. And before you know it, that needle's going to disappear in someone else's own hands. Instead of be on your hands. These McCulloughs, these Super 250s, these things sell pretty good. I mean, not even just a couple weeks ago, I showed my dad this Super 250. Like 5 months ago, that saw just completely sold just like that on eBay. Completely as clear as day, about $300. Sold for $350. I thought, damn, that is freaking crazy for a dang Super 250. But I'd rather find people that doesn't know about chainsaws because that gives me an opportunity to get my look back again. I mean, I was struggling to find this thing Pioneer I'm looking for. I mean, I was not looking for a P28, but I was going to look for try to find me a P65. But whoop-de-doo-dah, I came across a P28, and that was good enough. You know, I found a Pioneer, but I haven't found any McCulloughs, which does it kind of weird for me because I usually find chainsaws sometimes every day. Well, not every day, but every month from that when people bring them up in yard sales and stuff. Now it's kind of going down now. My luck is going bad. It's still going good. It's going bad because I can't find what I'm looking for. I mean, yeah, I can find Pullens, Steels, Huskies. Not Pioneer though. I can't find those, so they're gonna be left out. Freak Remingtons, Toros, and Troy Builts, and Craftsman. But by the way, those are the chainsaws you're gonna find around here, or the Lancaster and PA chainsaws. I mean, they made a few, but you can still find those chainsaws, and they're worth a lot of money. They're worth like $1,000 on eBay. Yeah, sure, you can find those chainsaws real easy, but now if you look back at McCullough's, Pioneers, and like, other brands like little Nitro chainsaws, you think you're going to find one around here? No. Those Ford chainsaws, those Ford push mowers, do you think you're going to find them around here? No. Because I'm pretty sure around this area we didn't have very much McCullough dealers. We had more Steel and Husky and Pullen dealers and Craftsman dealers and all kinds of other brands that was from the East Coast here. But we just kind of really likely didn't have very much McCullough dealers like you West Coast owners have. I mean, you guys probably had over about 16,000 McCullough dealers where you're at, and probably about maybe 4 or 6 less here, and probably a lot more in Canada up there. That's probably about 14,000 of them up there in Canada. So, one doubt there's a lot of McCullough dealers up there. So there's only like 14,000, including Canada. That makes one, and some of the half of the East Coast. So yeah, only 14,000 remaining. So maybe about 20,000 of them out there, probably maybe 25, maybe 26. I don't know. I don't look this shit up and go to Google and look this up. I'm more interested in trying to find the Super 250 than about the history about it. I mean, yeah, you gotta learn the history to get into McCullough's, but yeah, I learned some of the history. I'm trying to get it right. Don't worry. But Robert McCullough, I mean, yeah, his chainsaws were by far more better than what it is now. I mean, yeah, people called McCullough's back in the early 90s were crap because they would never start up, they would never run. But now people is solving problems to fix these McCulloughs now. Everybody's trying to figure these things out now. And I want to step in part of that also, just to try them out. Why is everybody going back to McCullough's now after trying to figure them out again? But the reason I want a McCullough because it's different. It's something not even in my collection. It's something different in my collection. I'm just trying to find 2 McCullough chainsaws. And then I'm done with chainsaws. I'm going to quit finding chainsaws after these 2 McCulloughs. Yeah, I am entirely quitting after this. These chainsaws are going to get more harder to find in the mid-future. They really are. Unless you're going to buy yourself a brand new one, and how about her? But, me, I don't like new equipment. Because I know new equipment won't last as the old equipment would. But I don't know what I'm going to do yet because I'm kind of out of money. And I mean, I'm like literally out of money. Like, I've wasted my money on this Pullen, but I had to buy it because it was something different also in my collection. I mean, yeah, I had Pullens in the past that were junk, but I hope this one stays alive and stays running. I just hope it doesn't get blown up again by using it too much or letting it overheat too much. That was the problem with McCullough's. They overheat a lot. They overgain their heat. But it's crazy about the story about Robert McCullough's design. I mean, it's absolutely freaking crazy about his design. I mean, yeah, Robert McCullough did. He put his chainsaws to the chest of lumber than Pullen, Steel, Husky did. I'm sorry to say Husky owners. I'm sorry to say Steel owners, but stated fact. I mean, Steel didn't put those things in their tests that much. They only did a few of their saws. Their big bad boy saws, and that was it. Now, you can't get chainsaws with low-end CCs. You can't get them You cannot get chainsaws now these days with high-end CCs anymore. The government kind of took over that, and the companies had to obey the government's rules, obey the law's rules. Now that they need to step over more chainsaw safety in the early 90s. So when the early 2000s came, they all got papers in the mail that said you can't overpower the CCs anymore. Now this time you get to lower down the CCs, to lower down the torque, to lower down the power of the chainsaw. So for safety, regulations of kickback. So the kickback was the problem with it because the chain was spinning so fast around the early 80s, and that's what caused a lot of deaths. But it still caused a lot of deaths, and the government still ain't listening about that. On that. So the department and the government also had to clarify to make chainsaws with lower in CCs. So the only point, you can't get them with 89 CCs anymore, you can't get them with 100 CCs anymore. So it's going to be either 70 CCs will be like 75. They always stop at the 5. So if it has anything with the 5, they got to stop with it. That's how far they got to go. But if they say if the kickbacks get worse, they're going to have to lower down the CCs even more. So it causes them more to participate, cause them more to break down a lot more sooner, cause them to be unreliable. It causes the readings to go out a lot 10 more worse to other chainsaws if they lower down the CCs. The 2-strokes, you can't help out. You can't really just lower down the CCs of a 2-stroke because it'll basically damage the engine, damage the cylinders, making them more unreliable instead of reliable. But entirely, McCullough made a lot of feature designs. And, I mean, a lot of designs, you know. Robert McCullough was another head of its game, you know. I mean, all chainsaws from the past are awesome, but, you know, I'm never going to find a McCullough because they're hard to find. And you're not going to be lucky to find those chainsaws. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. Entirely, like finding your car keys left in the freaking grass so you can unlock your car door. It's like finding that. It's like taking a rim off of the damn car and you lost the lug nuts. And try to find your lug nuts.